let's find some great books to read. Now, if you're like me, you love Ken Follett. If you follow my channel, you probably know that The Pillars of the Earth is one of my favorite books of all time. So I thought about doing a ranking of what are the best Ken Follett books of all time. But, I think, if you've read several of his books, you probably think that Pillars of the Earth is the best. I think he agrees that Pillars of the Earth is the best. I think definitively it is his favorite. So I don't really know what a ranking is going to do, but let's talk about his books. And maybe you'll find one that you realized you've never read, or maybe you find one that you've been avoiding. And then after watching this video, you think, you know what? I'm going to try that one next. Now, since we are talking about The Pillars of the Earth, this is the first book in the Kingsbridge series. The Pillars of the Earth, if you're unfamiliar, is about a cast of characters and their lives that revolve around the building of a cathedral in a fictional town in England in the 12th century. And if you've never tried this book, do know that the first half of it does move along very slowly. I will say that. I will say that there have been people who have given up after they've gotten halfway through. The second half is brilliant. It so makes up for the first half. But as I was saying, so this book is part of a series about Kingsbridge, and he's written 4 other books related to Kingsbridge. One is A World Without End, A Column of Fire, which are sequels to The Pillars of the Earth, and then The Evening and the Morning is actually a prequel to The Pillars of the Earth, and then The Armor of Light is sort of like the last book of the series. Now, I will say that I have read A World Without End and A Column of Fire. Now, I liked both of them. I wouldn't say they were, my favorite Ken Follett book or anything like that. I felt like they were kind of going along the same formula of The Pillars of the Earth. Not that, Ken Follett's books aren't formulaic. They certainly are. He's a thriller writer. He's a masterful thriller writer. But he's still what I would say is, a popular writer, which, I'm not, that big of a book snob that I won't read a popular writer. If you do it well, I'll read, a popular novel any day. But I will say that I have noticed that some of Ken Follett's more modern books, it almost feels like somebody else is writing it, trying to be Ken Follett. And the reason why I say this is because there is another series that he has, the Century series, which starts with Fall of Giants, which deals with World War I. So it's a cast of characters dealing with World War I. And then the next book is Winter of the World, which is loosely related to Fall of Giants. It's kind of like the characters in Fall of Giants. Their children are in Winter of the World. And then The Edge of Eternity is the third in this series. And The Edge of Eternity deals with more kind of like, the 1960s. So kind of like the Cold War. So the after effect of World War II. And it was weird. I could not get through Edge of Eternity. And like I mentioned, I just felt like somebody else was writing it, trying to be Ken Follett. That's just what it felt like to me. So I've kind of avoided a lot of Ken Follett's more popular novels.
Oops, I meant to say, which is why I've avoided Ken Follett's more modern novels, the ones he's written more recently.
Which is why I never finished the Kingsbridge series. But let's go back to his other novels. He's got plenty of novels that I think are fantastic. So let's start with The Eye of the Needle. This was published in 1978, and it was really his first big hit. And it is about a German spy who has the information that will change the course of D-Day. And there's only one person who is between him and him telling Hitler where the Allies really are going to land during D-Day. Because if you don't know the history of World War II, the Germans thought that D-Day was going to happen at the Pas de Calais, when in reality it happened in Normandy. And if the Allies hadn't been able to trick the Germans, D-Day would not have worked. Well, between this German spy and Hitler finding out where the Allies really were going to land is A Lonely Woman on an Island. It's very fast-paced. It's very well written. I just thought it was really good. A Dangerous Fortune. This is another one that I enjoyed. I wouldn't say it was like my favorite by any stretch of the imagination, but it starts off at, an uppity boarding school in England, and there is a boy who drowns, and then the book is kind of like the story of this death and how it reverberates in the lives of the various characters who were there at that time. That one was good. I enjoyed that one. A Place Called Freedom. This is one that I enjoyed. It begins in Scotland in 1766, and there's a character, and I believe he steals something. So he is sent over to what will eventually become the United States as an indentured servant because, he stole something. So that happened a lot. Now, I wouldn't say that this was my favorite Ken Follett book of all time, but I really enjoyed it. Now, Jackdaws. This is one that I really liked. If you've never read Ken Follett, you might want to start with this one. So this one is just your typical spy novel, another World War II spy novel. D-Day is approaching, and you've got a woman spy, an English spy, and then you've got a terrible Nazi who's trying to essentially kill her, right? But it's really good. It just goes at this really fast pace, and it's just a masterful example of your pop fiction spy novel. The key to rebellion Rebecca. This is another World War II spy novel, but this one takes place in Cairo. This one I liked. This one I enjoyed. It was a little bit, I don't know, it was a little bit more, I don't know, salacious than even what you would expect from Ken Follett. Now, I will say that if you cannot handle open door sex scenes, you will not like Ken Follett at all. And I would say The Key to the Rebecca is definitely the most open door of all of his books, at least that I've read. Now, the next one, Night Over Water. So this is one, I don't know, it's not that popular, but I actually really enjoyed this one. So this was about the last flight of a airplane that was known as the Pan Am Clipper. It was one of those like luxury airliners, you know, before we all had to be in, you know, squeezed like a tin can. But Night Over Water is just about this particular flight and then the cast of characters that are inside of it. I don't honestly remember the particular details other than that I found it to be very fast-paced and very interesting, and I definitely wanted to find out what happened the whole time. Now, one that isn't fiction that Ken Follett has written that I've read that I really liked was On Wings of Eagles. So this is actually a work of narrative nonfiction. So it reads like a novel, but it's actually true. So it's about a group of Americans who were in Iran during the Iranian Revolution and how they had to escape Iran because one of them, he was arrested, you know, for political reasons. He was arrested and he was in an Iranian prison. And this is basically the story of how Ross Perot, because he worked for Ross Perot, and this all happened before anyone knew who Ross Perot was, you know, the dude that ran for president. But this guy who was imprisoned in Iran during the Iranian Revolution, he worked for Ross Perot in Iran, and this is basically about his prison break, how Ross Perot was getting no help from Jimmy Carter, like he didn't care. So he's like, okay, I'm just gonna have to get this guy out myself, and this is the story of how he did it. It was really good. Now, some Ken Follett books that I haven't read that look really good are The Hammer of Eden, Triple, Lie Down with Lions, which I've actually heard a lot of good things about. So I actually used one of my husband's Audible credits to download that one. My husband always has like tons of Audible credits, so I'm gonna start this one soon. Code to Zero and Hornet Flight. So those are some other Ken Follett novels that I haven't read that look good to me. But let me know in the comments below, what is your favorite Ken Follett novel if you have read him? If you've never read him, which book do you want to start with? And as always, happy reading.